most of our peers and the people around us got the American Pie version of
Yes.
sexuality, which has created just all of these unrealistic ideas of what sex is, what it's supposed to be. It's super heteronormative, super monogamous, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that all of that, along with purity culture, really makes sex
Right.
a difficult and challenging experience.
Welcome back to Dating Intentionally. I'm Talia, I'm a dating coach, and I'm sharing no-nonsense advice for navigating modern dating with confidence and ease, whether you've been on dozens of dates or you're just getting started. I believe dating can be fun, and we can enjoy the process even more when we feel confident about the decisions we make when navigating sex. That's what today's conversation with my guest, Claire Perelman, is all about. Before we get into it, I just want to ask you if you know your relationship needs. And I ask because if not, or if you want to refresh them, if you want to really hone in on them, I'm running a live workshop on Monday, May 6th, all about how to discover and define your relationship needs. So if you're listening to this podcast and you want to come to the workshop, you can use the code podcast at checkout for a discount. And if you're listening to this and it's past Monday, May 6th, 2024, you can actually get my pre-recorded course on how to identify your needs. I'll pop the links and the code in the show notes. The code will work for both the course and the workshop. So in this workshop, we're going to go over needs versus wants, why it's so important to know your needs in dating, and I'm going to walk you step by step through figuring your needs out. It took me spending years and thousands of dollars in therapy to figure this out, and it was the most important tool for me in my dating journey, which is why I love teaching this workshop. I've condensed the process down and I've created worksheets for you so you can do it in a fraction of the time that I spent and start dating more intentionally. Once again, the code is podcast. The links are in the show notes, and you can use the discount for the workshop, which is on Monday, May 6th, or you can use it for the pre-recorded course if you can't make the workshop. And I can't wait to see you inside either way. Claire Perlman is a queer Jewish licensed sex therapist based in the Bay Area. She's all about helping people rediscover play, pleasure, and abundance in their sexuality. Claire is one of my favorite follows on Instagram. She has incredible tips for anyone looking to improve their communication in the bedroom and in early stage dating. I had a blast in this conversation, and I hope you enjoy listening to it. Claire, welcome to Dating Intentionally. I'm so excited to talk to you. I've been following you for a while, and this is just so surreal that I get to talk to you.
Yay, I am so happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me
Yeah.
on.
How are you?
I'm good. It's a sunny day in San Francisco, and nothing makes me happier than the sunshine.
I
So,
know
as a SoCal girl,
we're basically neighbors. It's funny, like we should have just done this in person, but like I'm gonna go.
I thought about that.
Maybe
Put
next
my
time.
mic in the car. Yeah,
Yep,
next
yep.
time.
So, okay, I would love to ask you this hinge prompt that I selected for you. Okay.
Yeah.
We are the same type of weird if.
We are the same type of weird if we are dancing with no abandon in between lifting sets at the gym, a full gym.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I'm at the dancing with no abandon stage yet. I'm still too self-conscious in the gym to even like pick something up. I don't know what it is. But I
Oh,
would
I'll teach
love
you.
to get there with you. That's
It's
amazing.
I'm just squatting heavy and then in between like jamming out to my music on my AirPods, and I look like a total weirdo, but it makes me so happy to dance in between sets.
I love that. I love that energy. We need more of that in the gym. There's a lot of like serious, intense things happening in my gym, which is a climbing gym with like a regular gym in it. So
Mm,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a different
Yeah.
vibe. It's
Good
very
old 24-hour
granola.
fitness. Yeah.
You know what? That makes sense. That's how when you said that, it makes me think of like the subway in New York City. It's like I just dance, whatever, who cares?
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
vibe.
who cares? Whatever. I the best is when I have like the platform, the room with all the platforms just to myself, and then I can really dance and do whatever I want. And don't worry, everyone, I am lifting heavy enough. I can't always dance in between sets.
That's amazing. Well, thanks for that. I'm glad that I'm glad I know what kind of weird you are.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, I just would love to hear, how long have you been a sex therapist? Like what's the story there?
Yeah, so I opened my private practice in August 2022, and that's the same time that I launched Sex Clarified, which is like my handle on all of the social media channels. And that's when I really started practicing as a sex therapist full time. I was working as a licensed therapist for many years before that, but I was actually working with kids. I was working in high schools for 2 years, and then I was working in elementary and middle schools for several years before that. And no, I was not doing sex therapy with the kids, although high schoolers definitely need appropriate sex education. So do kids.
Right.
But I always kind of had the idea in the back of my head that I wanted to be a sex therapist, but I loved working in schools and I loved the environment. I loved my coworkers, and I was never really set on opening my own private practice, but I got a bit burnt out. It was really high acuity cases, a lot of trauma. I was working
Mhm.
almost entirely in my second language. And so it was really kind of intense. And after a few years of that, I decided that it was time to go full throttle into sex therapy, and Sex Clarified was born.
Wow, what an amazing leap. Also, what's your second language?
Spanish.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
So, then what was the like, why sex therapy then? Like, what was, like, the real reason you wanted to just focus on sex in your therapy practice?
So I've always been obsessed with sex and relationships. And the fun part about sex therapy is that it's not, clients can come to me and their main focus can be sex and relationships or sexuality or couples counseling, which is what I do a lot of. But I'm also like the quote unquote regular therapist. So I'm trained as a generalist and I
Mhm.
can do regular therapy. And I do end up doing quote unquote regular therapy with my clients because sex really ties into every other aspect of our lives. But you can ask any of my friends, coworkers, whatever. I have always been like, my main passion is talking about people's relationships and how they're relating to each other and what sex people are having and all that kind of stuff. And so then I decided that I should just monetize my greatest passion and do it full time.
Love it. We have that in common. I've also been so fascinated and interested in sex and relationships since as far young as I can remember. Like, that's
Yeah.
amazing. So, what is one of the most surprisingly common issues you see in your practice when it comes to sex and dating?
I would say one, there's a lot of erection challenges. That's huge. People really obsessed with the idea of keeping an erection for X amount of time, coming from an erection, all of these different things. There's a lot of that. And then just a lot of anxiety in general around sex. I think that our society has really done us a disservice around teaching us about sex, normalizing sex education, sexuality, all of that kind of stuff. And so that's a lot of what I talk about, is just kind of normalizing all
Yeah.
kinds of sexual things.
I mean, yeah, the erection thing, I guess, as a woman who has a lot of female friends, I don't hear about that a lot. I don't think that men are necessarily chatting with their friends about that either. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's
So I could see,
unfortunate. No,
yeah,
it's
so it should be out
unfortunate. You're
there
right.
more. Yeah. Um, but yeah, that is surprising. And then, in terms of just, yeah, like general anxiety with sex, where do you think that starts because we don't have such great education? Like, where does it really come from?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like, as a really experienced dating coach, you probably hear a lot of anxiety around sex as well.
Yes.
And I think that it comes from this kind of idea that we've created in our heads as Americans and kind of like Western culture around what sex is quote unquote supposed to be. And, like, I grew up watching American Pie. Like,
Right.
that, right? That was
I think one of
the
my
model.
earliest sexual, like, movie memory is in Rat Race. Like, when you know what I'm
Oh
talking.
my God.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Tell
that's
me.
like
No, tell me. I don't think I even
so it's
watched
one
Rat
of the
Race.
first it's probably the first PG-13 movie I saw, and it's, like, this part where, like, the 2 brothers were, like, really dumb, or, like, driving next to a car with, like, some
Uh-huh.
hot girls in it, and they, like, lift their shirts up, and, like, their guys were just like, "Ooh,"
Yeah.
like, eyes bugging, like, that was,
Yeah.
like, one of my earliest movie sexual memories.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
and that's what
exactly.
I
Like
learned, was
that.
like, "Oh, okay."
Mhm.
Like,
That's the script we're given about like what
yeah.
sexuality is, like what hotness is. And I just distinctly, I think I watched American Pie like a couple times in middle school or something. And
Yeah.
that was the narrative that was given to me. Honestly, I personally was lucky enough that my mom was very like sexually open and talked about sex like it was a very normal part of life. So I really internalized that like that was okay, that sexuality was cool and fluid and all that kind of stuff. But I think that most of our peers and the people around us got the American Pie version of
Yes.
sexuality, which has created just all of these unrealistic ideas of what sex is, what it's supposed to be. It's super heteronormative, super monogamous, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that all of that, along with purity culture, really makes sex
Right.
a difficult and challenging experience.
Yeah, purity culture is an interesting one. Like, I'm Jewish. I think you're Jewish too, right?
Yeah, I'm
And
also
I feel like
Jewish.
I completely don't have any of that in my childhood. It was like the opposite message growing up of like,
Mm-hmm.
no, go hook up and like have babies. Like that was the message
The
that I
Jewish
feel like
summer
I grew up.
camp message.
Yes, and exactly. So speaking of anxiety, like I don't know if you have this experience being online on Instagram and on TikTok and everything, like,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like a lot of our anxiety with sex and dating comes from TikTok and Instagram. Like,
Oh, yeah.
what do you think, like, in your words, how would you describe the difference between working with a therapist on dating issues and then just trying to rely on like scraps from Instagram and TikTok for all this stuff?
That's a great question. I think it's really hard. I mean, this is part of why I wanted to start social media, like doing social media, because I felt like so much of the information out there was misconstrued, it was incorrect, it was just not giving enough nuance. I think that's the most difficult part of social media. No one likes nuance, but
I know.
I know
We don't
you
have
must.
the time for it. We just don't have the patience, but it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think some of your page really does a good job of like
Thank you.
leaning into that nuance and being clear about it. But I think that working with a therapist or working with a coach is you get really obviously individualized care. There's only so much I can talk about, holding a boner or not online, which I definitely do. But like, I can't speak to exactly what's happening for you. Like, I would want to
Mhm.
know, what's the messaging you learned about sex, what's happening for you, when is it easy to hold a boner, when is it not, and those kinds of things, which I just can't do by doing Instagram content. I think
Yeah.
the best thing to do is like follow professionals, people who are really experts in their field, and not just like randomly talking about dating. I mean, I think people can talk about dating, but I think if you're going to really try and learn the tools, it's best to follow someone who really does niche down into this.
100%. And I'm with you. And that's like, I try really hard to stay in my lane. And when something's completely, I know, like ethically, I'm like, I cannot give this advice because I'm not trained. I don't go there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, go
Yeah.
follow Claire, go follow someone else. Like, yeah. So I totally agree. And it's tough because you're right. Like, we want all these bite sized quick fixes, silver bullet type,
Hmm.
approaches to these really big, deep issues. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
And
it's hard.
what advice do you have for someone who's maybe overdone it on the TikTok and Instagram advice and now just has no idea what to do?
I well, they probably have some idea what to do if they've really overdone it, right? Um, but I think the hardest part about working with someone individually is that it's financially not always feasible, right? And
Right.
so sometimes the best thing to do is kind of overdo it online. I think if you can, is like go to one of their workshops or get one of their courses. Like I know Todd Baratz, Your Dag Nonsense, he
Hmm.
does like a low fee dating workshop every couple months, maybe more than that. But
Right.
that's like a professional that you can work with. And I've started doing workshops. Like those are the kinds of things that you can plug into so that you can get a little more individualized care as opposed to just kind of the bite-sized pieces, or like read some of the amazing books on these
True.
things, or like audiobooks.
Yes. Right. Yeah. I mean, I live and die by audiobooks. And
I do love a
yeah,
good
I love
audiobook.
this. That's great advice. Thank you. So I want to switch gears a little bit because this
Hmm.
question came up a lot. We're getting into a lot of different topics, but
Yeah.
this question came up the most, just like, and I'm really curious to hear from you. How do you approach the decision to have sex with a new partner? Like, what factors should we
Mm.
consider? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I feel like people are asking me this, like my friends ask me this all the time.
Yeah.
Um, I think one of the most important things when deciding to have sex with a new partner, whatever kind of sex that may be, right? Not just insertive sex,
Hmm.
is really identifying how safe you feel with that person, how safe and comfortable and relaxed you feel, how much you've communicated about what you would like to get out of that sexual experience with that person, and if you feel like they are able to hear you, and how attuned do you feel like that person is to you. Obviously, an attunement, I mean, like, how much are they kind of plugged into if you're feeling good, if you're feeling bad? And this is all outside of the bedroom, right? Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
even like one of my friends came over the other day and they were just like, "Oh, have you eaten already? Like it's kind of past lunch." That's like attunement, right? Like they're
They're
checking in.
considering
I
you.
maybe
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Okay.
so you can figure those things out by like going on dates and whatever. Or chatting with them, that kind of thing. But I think that depending on what you're looking for out of that sexual experience, you can assess all of those different things and even talk to the person that you're thinking about having sex with. You can say to them, "Hey, I'm thinking about having sex with you or thinking about doing X, Y, and Z like with you. How do you feel about that? Where are you
Right.
feeling in that realm?"
And then I could hear people already being like, "But Claire, that's so awkward." It's like, when do we even talk about this? Are we talking about this like over our spaghetti at a restaurant?
Hell
Like what?
yeah. I have no shame when it comes to this stuff. That's
Me either.
definitely,
But like we know a lot of people do. So
yes.
when it comes, what's like, yeah, like if I'm dating someone new and I'm feeling like I
Hmm.
wanna I wanna go there, but I wanna be careful.
Hmm.
How do I bring this up? Do I just dive
I
in?
would, yeah, I would. I mean, I would even start by being like, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something, and I feel super awkward about it."
Right, that's a good
Or
one.
the other thing that I suggest to people is writing it down prior. So you like have the points you want to hit on your notes app in your phone, and you're like, "Hey, I want to talk to you about this thing. I'm really kind of nervous about it," and so I like wrote some stuff down. Or you talk about it over the phone, or you start the conversation via text.
Mhm.
My main thing is like don't have the entire conversation via text,
Right.
but if you don't feel like you're comfortable enough bringing it up just kind of randomly in person, you can text them and say, "Hey, I'm looking forward to our next date. I really want to talk about potential sexy time when we're there. I'm feeling kind of
Mm.
nervous about it, but I also like think it will be a better experience if we talk about it." Or, just even saying that
Yeah.
can kind of lower the stakes and then bring them in like to the plan with you.
Yeah, I like that. It's also like a gentle way of telling someone that you are thinking about it, even if you're not quite ready for it. It's
Mhm.
like, it's going in this direction. Like, I want to be, it's like some people get confused, like, oh, they haven't made a move, or like,
Mhm.
they haven't mentioned anything sexual. Like, do they like me? And it's like, maybe they just don't want to, be too forward or too aggressive or
Right.
creepy. There's so many things, there's so many ways this can go wrong.
Right.
And what you
Yes.
said just clicked for me, like a moment I had with my fiance where, like, before our
Mhm.
fourth date, which was planned near his home, I sent him a text being like, I know we've been like kind of flirty because we were really like heavily flirting via text, but I'm like, I'm not
Mhm.
ready to go home with you yet. And he was like,
I love
no
that.
problem. Yeah. I just like want, well, honestly, Claire, it was more for me.
Yeah, well, no,
Like
yeah, that's like you're
I'm a
setting
person
your
who would just like,
boundary.
he would just like ride with the momentum and just like, let's go to your apartment. So I was really saying it more for me, but he was like, of course, like, no worries. I totally get it. Like, but I think it did drop the hint that I was thinking about that, and I think that, even though it was like a boundary, it was a good sign that he knew that was in my head.
Honestly,
Yeah,
I've done the same thing before when I know that I can just like ride with it, feel really good in the moment. I want to do this thing. I will just name my boundary before we even get there.
right.
I'll be like,
Yeah,
"I'm really excited to make out with you tonight, but I don't want to take any clothes off."
yeah. So clear, and still, it's like we're still gonna have fun. Making out's
Right.
a great time,
Exactly. And like
Yeah,
saying what you're excited about. And so
yeah.
I think all of that, or, you could even say, let's say you were in that fourth date scenario and you wanted to go home with them, but like you'd been flirting a lot, but they hadn't made a move and you're
Mhm.
not really sure. You could say like, "Hey, I know that our date this Friday or whatever is going to be close to your house. If you're interested, I'd love to like keep the party going at your
Right.
place."
Oh yeah, I can go the other way. Yeah, and then kind of
Yeah.
just talk that out. I love that. Well, okay, so I love this like kind of intro to communication, just safe ways to feel it out. But then what if there are other layers? And this is kind of like I got the most questions about this is if you have
Yeah.
previous trauma, like sexual trauma of any kind, this can be even
Yeah.
harder, right? It's like you're not
Yeah.
even working with a baseline of security within yourself to have these
Right.
conversations. So I would love to hear from you. What are some of the common challenges inside or outside the bedroom that someone may have if they've had a sexual trauma? Like what are we running into there?
Yeah. Yeah. It's dating and having sex can be really, really difficult when you have experienced some kind of sexual trauma in the past or abuse. And my heart really goes out to all of y'all that have had that experience. And I want to acknowledge the strength that it takes to continue dating and doing this challenging thing, even
Yes.
though it can bring up a lot.
Mhm.
So I think that there are many different things that can come up. One, basically, the way that trauma works is your body has not recovered from this difficult event, and your body and brain are still working as if they are in the crisis moment. And much of the time, your body and brain, your body mind will become triggered by smells, physical locations, physical intimacy, if it was sexual trauma, any of those things can kind of bring up that feeling again, and your body will react as if it was the past experience. And so when it's sexual trauma and then you're trying to have a healthy sexual relationship, it can bring up a lot for you. And I think that number one, working with a trained professional, I think a trauma therapist, a sex therapist, all of that can be really, really beneficial. Also, educating yourself on trauma. There are so many great resources on trauma out there. The Body Keeps the Score, My
Mhm.
Grandmother's Hands. All of those are really, really great resources. And understanding what happens to your body and what happens to your mind when you are triggered, I think is really, really important in normalizing that, like, it's totally okay to have those reactions and acknowledging that maybe those aren't the reactions that you're hoping for. Being really, really compassionate with yourself and gentle with yourself. And part of healing from trauma is reminding your body mind that you are in fact safe in this moment. And so doing that can be creating safe experiences for your body so that your mind can learn that, oh,
Mhm.
we actually are safe doing this thing that in the past was really, really scary and unsafe.
So I want
Do
to
you have any
pause there.
questions? That's,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, lots to unpack. I love it. Love your answer. Like you are so wise. I love it. Um, okay, so if I'm with someone new and I've experienced
Hmm.
trauma and I know I have
Hmm.
triggers, I'm aware of all this stuff. How
Hmm.
do we build trust that with someone new who we've never had sex with? Right?
Yeah.
How does that work when I have trauma?
I think understanding what your triggers are,
Mhm.
and naming them if you feel comfortable with the person, that the new person. And the other thing is that, like, you never have to tell a new person the first or second time, like, everything, like exactly why you need these boundaries, right? Like,
Okay.
you can tell them, hey, I don't like my shoulders being grabbed in that way, or I don't like, getting like oral in this way. And you don't have to explain why. You don't have to be like, because I've had sexual trauma and here's my entire trauma history. I think that's the part where I think sometimes people get tripped up. They're like, well, then I have to tell them
Mhm.
everything. You don't have to tell them everything. You can say,
Mhm.
hey, don't eat me out. And that's my
Right.
boundary. And that's okay. You don't have to explain why. If you're continuing a relationship with this person, you might one day want to tell them what's
Yes.
going on for you, because I think that's important in creating depth and building a relationship. But you are allowed to give people your boundaries with no explanation.
100%.
And yeah, and I think when you're with a new person, especially if you're like, let's say my boundaries don't go down on me, because that's
Mhm.
whatever's happened for me, that's what I've decided will keep me safest. I can say don't go down on me. If someone gives me a negative response to that,
Like the
then I've
pushback.
automatically exactly, I've
Yeah.
automatically known, oh, this person actually probably isn't a safe person to explore
Right.
sexually with.
Right.
But if they respond with, okay, great, thanks so much for letting me know, then great. I now know that this will probably be a safer experience for me. So I think knowing my triggers and then knowing how to communicate them, and communicating them with not feeling like you owe an explanation. All of that is can be hard.
Yes, and you know what? It's even harder. Like back to what you were saying earlier about how we were brought up on American Pie. It's like we are taught that the
Hmm.
sex supposed to be this like fluid, experience where
Mm-hmm.
there's like no discussion other than like, does this feel good? Maybe like, you know, like one,
A hundred
yeah, but like
percent.
I want to normalize it. It's like it actually can take. It can be drawn out like this whole process. It doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
to all happen like right before you're doing it. It can be on a separate time. It can be over text. Like it's okay if it feels a little clunky. You can pause sex, right? And
Yeah.
like you can
Yeah.
like I want like I think people are really scared about how the other person's going to react, scaring them off, turning them off, you lose the mood, all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, that's going to happen. But it's
Mm-hmm.
okay. You can get the mood back, you know? Like,
Yeah.
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 So what do you think about that? Like, is your advice for just accepting that it can be not, it's not going to be the American Pie experience of just like, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I think you put it perfectly that like it's sometimes going to be clunky. And even people who have had sex a bunch of times, have no sexual trauma, you know,
Mhm.
whatever, they are maybe sexual experts, they still have clunky sex. Like
Yes.
there's still sex that like doesn't go well. And it's part of any kind of relational dynamic is that sometimes it's clunky, sometimes it doesn't feel good, and sometimes you have to talk about how fucking weird that was and
And you
laugh
can
about
laugh
it
it
and move
off.
on.
If
Exactly.
like if you're on the same team and they're not pushing back and they're kind of like they're empathetic and compassionate and they want you to have most people want their partner to have a good experience. Like I
Yeah.
believe in that there are good partners out there who are not selfish. You know,
Yeah.
you can laugh it off and then, you know, you'll and also like even with someone new, you can try again. I think a lot of people cut things off really early if like the first or second time is not what they fantasized or not what they thought. It's like I mean, I heard Matchmaker Maria talk about this and I agree. It's like it takes 6 weeks of like consistent
Mm.
sex with someone new to like get in the flow.
Mm,
What do you
yeah,
think?
yeah. I think we can relate it to like cooking, not like I love cooking, but um, if people make a recipe, like let's say you make a recipe and it's not that good, but you like prepared for it and whatever, and you did all the things right, you probably aren't like, oh, I'm never making that recipe again. You're like, oh, what did I miss? Like, how can
Yeah.
I change that? Like, let me
Right.
try it again. And you don't take
Yeah.
it personally. You're not like, this recipe
Right.
hates me.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Right. Right. Or like, or we're doomed. You know, yeah. I
exactly.
can never touch a frying pan again. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And if that's how we related to it, which let's be real, sometimes I relate to cooking that way. But if that's how we relate to it, then then we've cut ourselves off from so much potential pleasure.
Yes. So, are there any specific types of therapy or modalities that have been really effective helping folks reclaim their sexuality and intimacy after trauma?
Yeah, I would definitely explore any kind of sex therapy. A lot of sex therapy can be, I mean, it's talk therapy.
Mhm.
Sex therapists sometimes are also trained in other trauma specific modalities. I would encourage someone to also seek that out. There's EFT, EMDR, there's also somatic based therapies. Like all of those things, I think, are really important in really integrating the work that you'll do in the healing journey after sexual trauma.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that there are so many options, right? And like you
Hmm.
can try
Yeah.
something if it doesn't work, like you can try something else. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I
and
think
just
that's really
generally, just
important.
before we move on to the next topic, just like
Hmm.
what's one step someone could take towards healing and feeling just more empowered, more have more trust in themselves with sex and dating
Yeah.
if they've experienced trauma.
I think that really getting to know your own body alone.
Mhm. Mhm.
So really like loving on yourself. And that doesn't have to mean like you have a masturbation practice every single day, twice a day. It can be standing in front of the mirror and looking at your body and just expressing gratitude for it. Or if that feels too hard, expressing just like happiness that it exists, that like it works, that
Yes.
your, system is functioning, that you can breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And I think if you're able to go beyond that, like cultivating a solo sex practice, and just not with the goal of orgasming, but with the
Mhm.
goal of just seeing how it feels, seeing
Yeah.
how it feels to put your hands all over yourself, seeing what sensations come up, and then stopping if things don't feel good.
Hmm. I love that. It's yeah, it's so big. It's so these like small steps really add up. So that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I want to shift gears here because there's another topic I was excited to talk to you about, which is
Yeah.
navigating sex and dating as someone who is newly out as queer or just testing the waters with queer dating. So I know you're bisexual,
Yeah.
and you're currently you're out on these streets. So,
We're out in the streets. Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
and I really I'd love to hear, you know, yeah, like did you start your dating journey queer or like were you like what happened there?
No, I totally started straight.
Okay,
Um, my best friend, I love telling the story. My best friend in college and I met at the Jewish, who's still my best friend, by the way. We met at the Jewish queer like tabling thing, like 4 days into school. And it was basically like, who wants to help start a Jewish queer group?
love it.
And they went because they're super gay, and I went because I was such an ally. And then, in true bisexual fashion for me, they and I decided that we became best friends, like fast friends, and we decided that our hobby that year was to watch all of the L Word, which is like
Love it.
the
Yes.
lesbian yeah, show, the original one.
Yes.
Um, we watched every single episode that and cuddled. That was our hobby, and it's just hilarious that I thought I was straight for so long. And so then I finally came out as bisexual in my 20s, and I was really freaked out about dating. I was so used to dating men, and I knew how to do that. I felt like that was a thing that all my peers talked about, but learning to date as a queer woman was a whole new experience that is totally scary, and I totally want to normalize that for people. But also, you started somewhere dating whatever sex you were dating first, or whatever gender you were dating
Mhm.
first,
Mhm.
and you just get to start again now. You probably know how to date, like in general,
Right.
and dating the same gender is not that different in like logistically in all actuality. Sure, different people are different, but
Yeah.
that's going to come up no matter who you're dating.
Mhm. Right, that's so true. I love that, just, like, taking the pressure off. Like, this isn't that
Yeah.
different. It's like for I guess, I mean, look, I dabbled, I'm bi as well, and I did date women in my
Uh-huh.
journey, and I kind of equate it as, like, to trying a new workout class. It's like, I know how to work out, but I'm gonna go to
Yes,
this class, I'm gonna
exactly.
probably stick out, I'll probably be a couple steps behind, I'll probably be in the back, like, you know,
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna get a workout, you know?
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Yeah, it's just like trying a new workout class. Like, it's probably you don't know what you're doing, but you still already own the workout clothes and you've done
Yeah.
other difficult things before. So you kind of
Yeah.
know how to do it. It can definitely be like, it can feel like there's a lot of pressure, but
Yeah.
in all actuality, like, you probably know more how to relate to another human than you give yourself credit
Right,
for.
and that's all it is, that's all dating is, like, doesn't matter,
Hmm.
you know, who's across from you and what gender, sex, whatever they are, like, it's yeah, it's just like, how can we
Yeah.
find the common ground? What can we connect on? How can we have fun talking with each other? That's it. That's
Exactly,
basically
exactly.
what dating is.
Finding as
Okay,
much fun as possible.
so let's just say, like, look, there's still a lot of pressure, right? So, like, let's say
Yeah.
I'm starting to date, other women, and I feel like I should know how to have sex with another woman because I am a woman, right? I have
Mm,
all the stuff. So but it's
mhm.
like but that's so not the case. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's God, that plagued me for so long, like, feeling like I had to be, like, perfect at having sex with other women. Um, the way that I like to think about it is that every single new person that you have sex with is new, and whatever parts they have, you might be a little more used to them or a little less used to them, but the best kind of sex is the sex that you communicate about, and the best part for me in queer dating that I found, and also talk to other people who are queer, is that when you're dating queer, like, there's almost even higher amount of communication around sex because there's no prescription of what it's supposed to be.
Mm.
There's, I can't remember who says this, but like, Gay men, one of the first things they ask each other is, what are you into? I think Dan Savage says that. But,
Yeah.
they ask, what are you into? You top or bottom? And
Right.
that's already
It's
more
part of it.
communication than a lot of straight couples
It's
have.
so true. It's sad, but it's so true. Oh my
Yeah.
god. We need to talk more. Like,
We need to talk. I mean,
yeah.
this is why I do what I do,
And I
because we
went
need
out
to
with
talk
so
more
many
about sex.
people when I was dating in Seattle, and it was so rare that there were conversations, and I would try and I'd
Hmm.
ask, like, I'd be the one asking me, like, what do you like? And they would be like, no one's ever
Hmm.
asked me that before. And I was just
That's so
shocked at
telling.
how many times I
It's
heard
so
that from
telling.
guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so many people are not talking about this. And I mean, we're really not encouraged to talk about it. But
Yeah.
I think that's so important that you were out there asking, what are you into?
I'm hoping I'm, like, paying it forward, like, it's gonna, like, maybe they'll ask someone in the future, because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I think with queer dating, though, it's like it seemed when you're first starting, it's like it's kind of mystified. It's like, what are there we talk about
Hmm.
the similarities, but are there differences that are apparent?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's probably not the sex that you're used to having.
Mhm.
But I think the other thing that I wanted to touch on is that whoever you're dating, if you're doing your queer journey, like they also had to come out at some point. They also had never had queer sex at some point. And so they probably have a lot of empathy for you and compassion wherever you're at on your journey. And I think that even if you have the same genitals as the person that you're hooking up with, that doesn't mean that you're suddenly going to be an expert at it. You're definitely an expert at your own, hopefully. But that doesn't mean that the other person across from you or in bed with you likes the exact same thing,
Right.
especially with vulvas. People with vulvas like all kinds of different
We're
things.
like
And
snowflakes, which is
exactly. Like what I like is not necessarily what you like. And there's no
Yeah.
way for me to know without asking explicit questions. Or, if you don't feel like asking a million questions beforehand, you can do it while it's happening. Say, do you want it
Yeah.
harder, softer, more pressure, less
I mean,
pressure,
I've
all
asked
that
people
kind of
to
stuff.
show me. It's like, and that's really hot. I think just
Yes.
just show me and I'll
Yes.
show you. It's just like a little show and tell. Why not? Yeah.
I love a show and tell moment. But
Yes.
so many people are not comfortable doing that, or they don't even think about it, or they think like,
Yeah.
oh, that's
Right.
lame if that person has to show me. Like, no, dude, that's the best way to find out.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about the the fear that someone isn't going to want to have the patience to quote unquote teach, like if the more experienced person doesn't want to like teach or help or like guide the less experienced person in any situation, like if
I mean,
straight, gay,
I
whatever.
feel so sad for the person who doesn't want to teach. Like,
Yeah, me too,
that
me too, me too. Yeah.
sucks for them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that gives the person who is wanting to learn way more information about the person that they're hooking up with, that, like, oh, maybe they're not that patient or compassionate or interested and invested in that relationship. I mean, I think about it like, if when I first started cycling, I needed to learn from someone, like, what are the rules of the road? Like, how do I
Yeah.
clip in and out of these fucking shoes? It's really scary. And if the person who was teaching me was like, oh, sorry, Claire, I actually don't have the time to teach you. Like, you should just know how to do this. But like, I still want you
Oh
to
my
ride
god.
50 miles with me. Like, that's not
Yeah.
personal. That's on them. That sucks for them.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you know what? I think like it could be a sign they are not necessarily emotionally available. Like I think,
Hmm.
when I was dating and I definitely was not ready for a relationship, I didn't want to work on it with people. I was like, I don't want to deal with this. Like yeah. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of it too. And
And
it's like,
that's
okay, there,
fine.
like you can find someone who would love to learn together. You both have to learn, like even with someone who's experienced, like you said earlier, everyone's different. Like they have to learn too. So no one's coming in knowing everything about your body right away. Like and vice
Exactly.
versa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So in general, I think this is one of the most important parts of this conversation is just like building an environment of safety with a new partner,
Hmm.
which is so it's like feels like a huge lift because now I'm thinking about I've been with my fiance for like almost 2 years and it's like I feel really safe with him. Um
Hmm.
and I'm like, but in the beginning, I built that safety by just going really slow. And he makes fun of me
Hmm.
because the first time we ever like did anything physical, I think I went down on him, and he
Yeah.
is like, that's never happened where like you stop there. I was like, yeah, because he whenever he was like, oh, I'm gonna go get a condom, and I was like, oh, we're not having sex.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and so we just like and like that was my way of building safety. It's like, I'm just going to not, I want to just test the waters, but I'm not going to like
Hmm.
have insertive sex with this new person yet. I want to see how this goes first. But what are some
Yeah. I
other
am all
ways
about that.
that you don't like, listener? You don't have to use my approach. Like, apparently, most people don't do that. So it's just my weird way of slowing down. So, what do you think? What are some other ways we can build safety with someone?
I mean, I'm all for that way. Like, I also think that you can hang out naked, and that doesn't mean that you're gonna fuck in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that
Mm-hmm.
you can make out naked. I like the idea of doing things at the pace that you want, whether or not society prescribes that, like, oh, just because you're naked now or you're giving him a blowjob, that means that you're gonna fuck. Like,
Yeah,
no. Um,
you can
and
get
I
off the
think that
elevator
that
anytime. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And even if you've like done it in the past, that doesn't mean you have to do it again in the
Right.
future. I think that's
Yes.
really important that not everyone is able to recognize. I also think building a sense of safety in the sexual arena also comes from building a sense of emotional safety for many, many people.
Yes.
And it sounds like, when you were able to go slow with your fiance, you were able to build that emotional safety, which helped you feel safe
Oh yeah.
sexually.
We talked for 2 months. Like, we were talking, kind of dating for 2 months before we even had like
Yeah.
home base, whatever it's sort of sex you want me to call it. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, yeah. So, and that was long for me. Some people are like, that's still really fast. Like, well, for me, it's all relative, you know.
Yeah. It's all relative.
So,
It's all
um,
relative.
what do you think about like debriefing? Like, I feel like sometimes that
Oh,
helps
I
as well.
love a sex exit survey.
Okay, how would we conduct one? How would you conduct one?
Okay, so I got this from a previous partner of mine. They we hooked up for the first time. It was like a one night stand at the time, and then we kept dating. But they were like, "Okay, sex exit survey. Like, how did you feel?" And I was so excited. I was like, "This is fucking genius."
That's amazing. Like,
It
right,
was
was it right
amazing.
was it right after, or was it,
It was
like,
immediately after.
I feel like that's a lot of yeah, I've heard that doing it right after isn't as good because it's like if there's anything negative, but I don't know, what do you think?
So yeah, it can really depend.
Okay.
They were catching a vibe. We're both very like out there and loud and whatever. But I think the way that I like to phrase it is, was there anything you wanted more of? And was there anything you wanted less of? And is there anything you're excited to try next time?
Cool. I
Um,
like that.
yeah, I think
Easy.
that takes some of the pressure off of like, is there anything you didn't like? And then it's like, oh God, like
Yeah.
no one wants to say that.
It's like your kissing
Um,
technique isn't the vibe.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah,
some people want to like express that, right? But I think
yeah.
you can do it immediately after. It can also be like very pressury to do it immediately after. I usually encourage people to talk about sex when their clothes are back on,
Mhm,
because
mhm.
then you're not like doubly naked. And thank you. I love
It's
that
so
phrase.
true. Yeah.
Um, but I think phrasing it in that way of like, what did you want more of? What did you want less of? And what are you looking forward to in the future? Like, what do you want to try next time? Can help make it so that like, oh, I wanted less tongue when we were kissing, or I wanted less
Mm,
pressure when you were doing
right.
this thing or whatever.
Okay. I love that. I like, these are all great, and I hope that anyone listening can try these. Again, it's okay to test these out, experiment. It doesn't have to be perfect. It could be clunky and
Yeah.
awkward. Um,
Yeah. And many times people will answer those questions and be like, I don't know. Or they'll be like,
yeah, I
it
know.
was great. I no
That low
notes.
key
You're like, okay, great.
frustrates me so much when people are like, I don't know. Okay, so we're gonna do one more thing. This is like a bonus. So I have like
Great.
this is like a listener question.
Great.
Okay, so let me just read this. Um, I, 31 female, I'm dating a guy, 31 male, who is really bad at texting. Even when on the apps, he would take 24 to 40 hours to reply. However, he is great in person, very present, never on his phone, and always locks in the next date. He doesn't seem to like small talk over the phone between dates. Once he left me on red for 3 days, and I double texted him to confirm our plans, which he did. When I asked him about this in person, he was very apologetic and he said he had a busy week and he just hadn't thought about not replying. He apologized and took accountability, saying, I can see why you were confused. I'm sorry. My friends say the texting is a red flag and we are moving too slowly because we're not exclusive yet after 7 dates. Is it a red flag? I like texting. I wish he was better with his phone, but I think I could move past it for someone really great in person. I am not ready to define the relationship yet after being hurt in the past, and the bad at texting implies that this guy wants to go slow. I really like him, and it seems like it can go somewhere, but I don't know whether to listen to my heart, gut, or my friends.
Spicy.
I know. Yeah, there's a lot
Um,
here, but I'm really curious to hear what you think.
Well, I think that there's a lot of interesting pieces in here. I personally am a huge texter. It's a huge turnoff to me when someone can't text me back. However, I have also attempted to date the person who doesn't text back. I think that bringing it up was a great thing, but what I didn't hear was any requests made. So he can
Mm,
take responsibility and validate your feelings, and that's all fine and good. And I'm glad that he did that. But I would like you to follow up with a request. And the request needs to be something like, can we figure out a way for us to connect more in between the times that we see each other? Can we find a time frame that works for you to text me back in? Um, because otherwise, he's just going to keep doing the same thing. Also, he very clearly showed you at the very beginning of this relationship, like when you were on Hinge, that he was not going to text you back. And of course, he's not on his phone when you're with him because he doesn't text
yeah. Right,
back.
right, right. Like, why would, yeah, that's true. I guess a bad texter is probably not going to be on their
He's,
phone
they're
unless they're
very
addicted to
present.
something else. Like, I don't know. Like, if
Yeah.
they're like following up on sports, I don't know what people do. Yeah, that's a really good point.
I'm curious what you think.
So, I mean, my little alarm bells were more going off about this listener talking to their friends
Mm,
about this, and their friends weighing in that the texting that they were moving too slowly because they weren't exclusive after 7 dates. It's like this is when your friends just are not helpful. You're like I believe that people's friends are way too protective to give good dating advice. Like
mm,
it's not a neutral third party like a therapist or like some a dating coach or someone.
mm-hmm,
There's just someone who are going to be like really blowing up the negatives to protect you because they love you.
mm-hmm,
So I think
mm-hmm.
that's like don't like take your friends out of the picture in early dating because and then also if they end up dating their friends are going to have a bad taste in their mouth because of
Yeah.
this, you
Yeah.
know. um
Yeah. So hard
and
not to ask
I
your friends,
also
though.
my other little alarm bell went off when you're bad at texting implies that this guy wants to go slow. I don't think that that's the two are necessarily connected. Like I think someone who just isn't on their phone a lot doesn't really mean they necessarily want to go slow. They might go slower because of that, but it doesn't necessarily mean they
Mm-hmm,
want to hold back or they desire like putting a wall up or something. It's just like that's how they text. It does affect the pace. Like to your point, like someone who
mm-hmm,
is active on text, you're gonna get to know them way faster in a way because you're like chatting. But yeah, so I want those are the two piece of advice I would have for this listener. Maybe like putting your friend's advice aside and
mm-hmm,
asking him about the pace instead of assuming
mm-hmm.
the text cadence implies something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. It,
It's like,
yeah,
yeah.
we don't know what it means for
Yeah,
him.
whenever there's a confusing situation in dating, it's better to just ask the person. Like back to having bold
Mm-hmm,
conversations, just ask.
mm-hmm.
Like, what did you mean by this? Or I'm confused. You know?
Yeah. Or I think like this listener already showed that she is able to courageously like bring up what's happening for her. But I think, we don't know how she did it, but I think if you're going to do it again, listener, to lead with I statements. So like, I feel sad when I feel disconnected from you, or when I don't know when I'm going to hear from you. Like when I was trying to date the person who didn't text back that often, we had a real conversation about like the way that I felt when they weren't texting me back. And then we came up with a compromise of they our agreement was they were always going to text me back within 24 hours. And that helped me know that if it took them longer than 24 hours, they've then broken our agreement, and that's something else to talk about. But I'm not going to freak out until they text me within, like, I'm going to give them that 24 hours, and then and they always did respond. And so then we were able to kind of move forward from there.
I love that. That's so great. And it's like you have to sit with a little bit of discomfort of waiting a
Mm-hmm.
little longer for a text, but you can trust that they're going to respond within 24 hours, which is reasonable. I mean, I leave my friends on red for days sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, and it depends on people's tolerance, right? Like
Yeah.
as an anxiously attached chick, like it was so
Mhm.
hard for me, but
Yeah.
once
Yeah.
I knew that we made that agreement, the other thing that we did, which might be helpful, was we made the agreement of they'll always text me back within 24 hours, and we always had another date on the calendar.
Oh, that's so
So
great. I love that. Yeah, that's great
yeah.
advice.
And we weren't exclusive. Like
Mhm.
but it was like, okay, we were making a commitment to dating each other. And so we had a date, out a week or two. And then in the meantime, I knew they'd text me back within 24 hours. The end.
Amazing. Well, this is great. I hope that's helpful, listener. I appreciate that your
Yeah.
answer, Claire. That's really great. Before we wrap up, I love asking guests this because especially you, like you also interact with so many daters out there, people who are navigating
Yeah.
this. So, what do you want to see more of in dating culture?
Ooh. Ooh. What I want to see more of in dating culture is definitely more bold conversations about sex before you're having sex, any kind of sex. Um, and I think that it will make sex so much better for so many people. And whether that means you start it on text or you do it over FaceTime or whatever, I think it will create an environment of more safety, more fun, and more pleasure, hopefully.
So well said. I mean, I totally agree. And
Thank you.
it's like the more you do it, the more you feel confident with it too. And the more you
Yes,
understand that
yes.
if someone clams up or if they get weird about it, they just might not be the match or someone you can feel safe with. So, yeah,
Yeah,
love
or
it.
they need practice as well. I like the
Right.
idea of it being like going to a workout class again. Like the first
Yeah.
time is really awkward and you don't know the moves. And then you get better and better at it because practice
Yes.
makes progress.
So, where can we find you? Where can we connect with you?
You can find me on Instagram or TikTok at Sex Clarified, spelled normally Sex Clarified with a D. And you can also find me on my website, sexclarified.com. And I am taking new clients, but they have to be in California to work with me. But I am starting to host workshops, which are available to everyone across the world. So catch those as well.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. And I will link everything you just said and also all the book recommendations you gave in the show notes for people.
Yes.
Thank you. This has been
Thank
amazing.
you. Thanks so much for having me.
I hope you found this conversation as helpful as I did. I feel like I learned so much from Claire, and I'd love to hear what you learned too. You can share in the comments below on Spotify or if you're watching on YouTube. You can also DM me directly on Instagram at dating.intentionally. I read all my DMs. Thank you for listening. Thanks for trusting me. Thanks for being here. I'd love it if you shared this episode with someone who is navigating dating right now and might need a little confidence boost or some tough love. If any of these episodes have helped you in your dating journey, you can help me by leaving a stunning review on Apple or giving Dating Intentionally 5 stars on Spotify. I'm also on TikTok now, so if you're over there, you can follow me there. I'd really appreciate it. Once again, I'm Talia. This has been Dating Intentionally, and I'll catch you next time.